So apologies for the change in the agenda. I'm Andrew from Delphix. I'll take you through a presentation on leading with DevOps and compliance to achieve your DevOps organizational goals. Just a bit of background. So I am a beginner surfer. I'm really not very good at it, definitely 100% a beginner. And this hobby started late last year. It's actually my 12-year-old daughter's idea. She set a goal to be a better surfer by the end of this year. So we've still got a bit of time to achieve that goal. And I thought I could help quite a lot more than that with her previous goals of ballet and netball and sorts of things. Surfing, I can definitely attach myself to a little bit better. I think the goal was partly driven by lockdowns last year and the year before. We're about sort of 11, 12 Ks from a beach, which is not ideal in the 10K restrictions. And really, despite our new freedoms and being able to get out, it's been a real challenge to get out and practice consistently. So the timing of getting out and being able to work on our surfing has been limiting. And really that is related to leading with DevOps, because when you're leading to DevOps, I guess similar to surfing, you need to have commitment and effort in the organization in order to achieve your goals and get to the point of continuous integration and continuous delivery. But I guess why lead with DevOps and compliance? So let's look at some of the rapid innovators over the last couple of decades. So 20 years ago, only one of the top 5 companies worldwide was a tech company. 10 years ago, that number changed to 2. But today, 5 of the top 5 companies in the world are software companies, are tech companies. I guess what's happening? What's fueling that growth? Why are traditional enterprises in certain segments losing ground to the tech giants, and why are they unable to compete? And especially why are they unable to keep up with their new competitors? I guess what are they doing essentially to be able to limit their innovation, to not innovate as fast as these sorts of companies? And the research shows that it's pretty much you guys that are helping with this. It's the DevOps approach and mentality is really moving the needle in this area. From a DevOps approach, I'm not sure if you guys know of Gene Kim. I'm hoping somebody does in the audience, but he's been a key advocate for many years. He's a DevOps leader. He's authored and co-authored a number of books, and surprisingly for technology books, they've become bestsellers. And his research into really thousands of companies around the world has shown that the best of the best at DevOps can really realize enormous overall gains and performance improvements. And they have become considerably more competitive than their peers. And he claims that there's actually hope and improvement for all organizations out there, because it's not necessarily in this particular practice about the small beating the large. It's very much about the fast beating the slow. And according to the data that he's done on these thousands of companies, including lots of Australian companies, the highest performing organizations worldwide are much better at speed, quality, and security. And his research went on to show that how this growing divide between the tech giants and the traditional organizations has really evolved. It's about speed and very much automation. It's core to DevOps. The agile giants like the Googles, the Amazons, Facebooks, Apples of the world, they're deploying thousands of times a day. Others are deploying still sometimes just 2 to 12 times a year. And with this speed, these organizations, really there hasn't been any category that's been sacred to them. So they've successfully moved across market segments. They've gone from books to retail to movies, groceries. And really it's no surprise that the tech giants with this sort of speed, they're dominating the global economy. So I guess the key is, how do you get this type of speed of deployment in your organization? Well, there's some major contributing trends that we need to look at in this area. The first trend, I'm sure you're all very much aware of from all of the previous presentations, is that companies are on a journey to deploy software a lot faster. They're going from slow waterfall releases, and hopefully none of you are still on slow waterfall releases, across to Agile to DevOps and to CI/CD based releases. And many of the organizations that we work with globally are releasing many thousands of CI/CD pipeline runs per month. And even on weekends, as you can see here, because the CI/CD that our customers are getting is very much continuous. And this is definitely the standard, or the new standard, for innovation in organizations. Another trend that I'm sure you're also familiar with is that apps are on the move, and enterprises used to run mainframes, Unix systems in private data centers, but they've very much moved to open systems, applications across SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, public and private clouds. And regardless of where you're running your workloads or where you're running your application, automation of the infrastructure is the key element here to this trend, really regardless of that application location. Another trend is that code automation has become the norm for most organizations. I'm sure you have one or more code automation tools in your organization. And there's really a range of options now, and this is essential for efficiency. One other trend, the fourth major trend, is that there's increasing risk in application data. In the data center era, we tended to trust the admins to safeguard our data. And today, hostile nation states, ransomware gangs are all targeting application data. Even the good guys, even the privacy regulators like GDPR, CCPA, even APRA in Australia, all of these types of organizations, the good guys as well as the challenging ones, are making data and applications riskier than ever. So companies are very much on the move to zero trust operations, where you can't trust anyone or anything when it comes to data, especially containing personal information could lead to a breach. It's too easy really for organizations to be compromised these days. And T-Mobile is a very instructive case for this particular point. Not sure if you guys know of the T-Mobile data breach. I think most of our American friends would know about this, but like many companies, prior to this breach, obviously, they made their application teams responsible for safeguarding their data. So developers were responsible for identifying sensitive information, writing scripts to keep that sensitive information from downstream environments and keeping it out of the dev, test, QA, UAT type environments. They very much, I guess it's a similar scenario of if you leave your house during the day, it's like locking the front door, but leaving all the side windows open, because their admins and developers unfortunately gave over key credentials to ransomware gangs, and then their CEO had to front up on news shows and all sorts to explain why they'd lost 50 million customers' personal information. So as far as trends go, they're some of the key trends we're seeing. And what we're seeing is that data is constantly growing in production applications, changing with every release, and it's very much filled with risk, as we've mentioned I've mentioned the T-Mobile example. So data is what we see as the last DevOps automation frontier. And despite being a very valuable asset, it's generally the big heavy ball and chain that has the biggest impact on slowing down organizational delivery. So if you guys are leading with DevOps, Gene Kim, just going back to him for a minute, he gives organizations a guide as to where they should really focus, because the code automation, the infrastructure automation is typically done, and it's focusing on very much the bottleneck in that process, which typically for organizations that we work with is the data. So just to extend the analogy, I'd see that the automation of infrastructure, from my surfing perspective at least, is to get the most appropriate surfboard for my very limited level of skills. For me, this is done. Most organizations out there have also automated their infrastructure. Automating the code is the next step. And for me, that's been finding a consistent, not very busy surfing spot so I don't run people over. And this one, I think most organizations have certainly succeeded in the code automation. And also automating the data is the next step. And that's both the risk elements, so any of the sensitive or personal information, and also the delivery elements, so distributing data as quickly as developers and testers and QA people will need. Surfing, this is like managing the conditions in the board to be able to pop up quickly and easily. So I wanted to go through some of our customer examples where leaders have really managed to get all three of these components working exceptionally well in their practice. Now, Joseph Catruno, I'll pronounce that name correctly at some stage, he runs engineering at UKG. I'm not sure if any of you know UKG. They're a very large SaaS company. They run HR systems for very large corporates around the world. And Delphix is part of their CI/CD pipeline. So when the pandemic hit, I'm sure you know from an HR company, regulations changed everywhere. So they needed to adapt their applications incredibly quickly, and essentially to accommodate all of the new regional regulations that came in. They spun up 1,700 new test environments in a day with Delphix, and more recently, where they go through thousands of releases a week, they have ephemeral test runs, and each new environment that they spin up lasts an average of 20 minutes. So these environments include very large-scale data, and they've managed to remove that data bottleneck. And Joseph has managed through this process to get a 20 times productivity improvement in his development team, and also a very large cost savings on the traditional methods they use to manage infrastructure. And UKG very much believes that if their developers are ever waiting for data, they are not being productive. Now, very large organizations can also benefit from this. It's not just the agile technology companies. So Bernard Gevgani is the CIO of BNP Paribas. They had to react very quickly to fintech organizations in Europe. They set up the bank's API self-service driven marketplace to increase their agility and allowed really anyone in the organization to access governed data through a very familiar portal. Now, Delphix enables the DevOps team to leverage that continuous, safe, full data sets in that very familiar environment. And this process improved their release quality and dramatically reduced their cycle times, along with enabling compliance for their GDPR regulations. Another one that I thought might be important for you, a company that you might not know, Natura & Co. They are the second largest beauty organization in the world, so not too familiar to me. But they have brands like The Body Shop and Aesop, which you might be more familiar with. They very much led with DevOps and compliance through transforming the speed of their data, and that was, again, a key bottleneck in their pipeline. They increased their delivery speed significantly, lowered the risk of their data, and also helped with their sustainability efforts. So a number of years ago, they had a triple bottom line where they need to look at their sustainability outputs, and one of the issues they had was large infrastructure costs and large carbon costs as well from that infrastructure. So they saved 70% on the storage and infrastructure they used in their test and dev environments, and also improved the speed of that. Now, back to a large organization, I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with Dell Technologies. You may actually use some of their software in-house. Quite simply, they had a very big data problem. And it was really severely affecting their capabilities and their ability to develop software quickly. And that's being their core market. That was a major problem for them. They had automated code. I'm sure you can imagine with Dell, they had automated infrastructure, and there was definitely no shortage of infrastructure at Dell. Though it was taking 3 weeks to deliver what they call good data to their DevOps practice, which slowed their progress on their digital transformation efforts. I realize many of you might be on one of the latest iterations of a digital transformation, though Dell's digital transformation was enormous. So they have over 80,000 staff, 24 data centers, thousands of applications, I think nearly 3,000 applications that were involved in this digital transformation. And it focused on business initiatives, worked on all of the people, the process and technology to really drive that customer value. These were some of the guiding principles, but what they found is that they needed to automate everything. They needed to treat everything as they had previously treated code and made everything API first. And they took a holistic view and built an internal and external, wanted to build essentially the internal and external digital experiences of the future. Data was their number one blocker, and that 3 weeks to deliver data was just too slow for them. Naturally, being the number one blocker, they didn't find it until the end, and it was one of the last ones that they solved. And I'm sure a number of you have also solved the code and infrastructure challenges of automating those areas, but possibly not the data. They integrated data into their existing process and made it fast, and really incredibly fast. And the outcomes have been significant. So instead of the 3-week wait for the DevOps teams and environments to be generated, they have pipelines that average around about 17 minutes. So it's a massive change in their ability to work with data. Importantly, all of this is completely user-driven. So the developers, testers, QA team all drive this through 100% self-service. The thousands of tickets that were generated a day to get fresh data, all of those are gone. All of those requests have disappeared. So that's all very interesting, but the biggest improvement they found is developer productivity. Prior to this project, where they tried to remove data as a bottleneck, their developers were spending 20% of their time writing code. And you might think that's not very much, but that's actually more than industry standard. Now it's just on 75% of the time, while the other 25% of the time, they're working with customers and designing. So their productivity gains have been quite enormous. And they've significantly reduced their deployment times as well. So previously had quarterly releases. Now they've gone to multiple, even up to hundreds of deployments per day. And feature releases has also more than doubled in the time that they've removed data as a bottleneck. Naturally, there's guardrails and metrics to allow this as continuous improvement. And they do want to get above the 80% productivity level for developers. But they now have that complete automation story. They've automated their code, automated their infrastructure, and automated their data. And they can deliver quickly now and very flexibly without their historical frustrations. So from a bottleneck perspective, when I'm talking about my surfing, my biggest bottleneck is the pop-up. I'm not sure if any of you are surfers or are thinking about surfers, but that's when you go from paddling to jumping up on the board. It could definitely be better. And most organizations' bottleneck in implementing DevOps at this point of their journey is data. And now that's both from a compliance risk perspective, but also very much a data delivery perspective. And globally, for our customers, they're finding out how much they can really improve current delivery capability through removing that bottleneck and get towards that tech giant delivery speed by moving to zero trust with data and rapidly accelerating data delivery. So these are the sorts of organizations, we have many more examples where they're leading with DevOps and compliance to drive their transformation. So that's how I wanted to introduce you to that and really point out that data is a bottleneck for a lot of organizations, but also welcome you to visit our stand and also visit our workshop tomorrow if you're in the area. We have a workshop at 9 o'clock tomorrow, going into a really deep dive into how you can remove data as a bottleneck from your DevOps pipelines. And thank you for your time and enjoy your lunch.